Hello, I'm Craig DeRoche, CEO of Family Policy Alliance. This week, we celebrate Independence Day on the 4th of July, and we highlight our nation's greatness for sure. It's important, though, that we reflect on what makes America unique. At least that's what I believe. Today, I'm joined by our own Grace Youngson. Grace is the co host of our House to Home podcast with Joseph Combs, and she's part of that creative team that's been reaching the next generation of family policy lines. Originally, now I'm smiling because it's the 4th of July, and she's originally from the UK, and we can have fun with that now. She moved to the USA for college as part of a calling, really, to be in what she calls a pro-life generation. She's a graduate now of Charis Bible College and a frequent communicator on pro-life issues. She offers a unique perspective on what America means to her, folks. That's what I want you to listen to, and reminds us of many of us when we kind of discovered the idea of America for ourselves in our heart. Grace, it's such a privilege to have you as a guest on my podcast. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, you have a powerful story in how God called you from your home country in the UK to study and serve in the United States. Tell us what happened and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I came to the US about 4 years ago now, which is really cool to think. But I grew up in an amazing Christian home and I was homeschooled for most of my school years. Very much very focused on God and on what He had called me to do with my life. And I think being homeschooled gave me that unique opportunity to really hone in on focusing in on seeking God for his calling for my life. Really, when I was like in my mid teens, I became super passionate about the abortion issue after discovering what it was. During that time, I was really seeking God about what he had called me to do. And I really felt like he was drawing me towards that side of things. And the more that I discovered and learned about that issue, the more I realized that it was really a family issue. And so, as I was seeking God for my next steps, I studied politics actually with Cambridge University for a little bit. And my original plan was like, I wanted to go study law and go into that side of things. And God like changed my plans and put it in my heart to come out to the US, which is kind of my sister's fault. We can blame it on her, but she wanted to come and study at Bible college out here. She probably influenced me a little bit to want to go too. But really, it was definitely God speaking to me as well, because it was not on my radar originally. So I came out and I kind of made a deal with God. I'm like, God, I will give you a year at Bible college and then I'm going back and I'm going to do, what I want to do or what I also felt like I should do. Well, I came out and studied for like it was 2-3 months into my time at Caris, and I just fell in love with America. And I was like, wow. And I just really felt a strong draw to be here. And I felt like I had just discovered such amazing community that I hadn't discovered before. So that was really my journey to coming out here. I ended up doing 3 years at Charis Bible College, and I graduated their business school track, which was amazing. And then I came to work for Family Policy Alliance, which has been amazing as well. So yeah, that's a little bit of how I came here. I mean, there's a lot more to the story of really how God provided every single step of the way. And it's really amazing. It's drawn me so much closer to God, this whole experience.
I just want to talk about that in a in a spiritual sense. What's the difference? Because I think people want to boil things down to like Republican or Democrat or this or that. It's not. We're kind of all over the board different spiritually than the UK. Why don't you uh share some of your observations?
Yeah, I think one thing that I observed pretty quickly, and this might be more Colorado specific, I've traveled a little bit around the US, not a whole lot. Um, but I definitely feel like Christianity is more normalized here in a sense that, it's very, very normal to walk into little gift shops and there's like Christian stickers everywhere and things like that. I think that people seem to be more in touch with the spiritual side of things, meaning God. And I think, and it was really interesting because I'm at Caris, I had a few friends who were also British studying there. And I remember talking to one of them, and we had both just gone back for the summer, and then we had come back to the US. This was a couple years back. And we both agreed. I was like, what did it feel like to you going back there? And he was like, oh my gosh, it felt like I stepped into a cloud of pessimism when I landed in the UK. And I was like, oh my gosh, you put words in my mouth. Like I knew that's what I felt too. I think one of the big things about America is people are very optimistic and big thinking. And I think that they're very in touch with the dreams that God has placed in our hearts and wanting to go after those and encourage those in other people. You don't see that in quite the same way in the UK, unfortunately. And me being more of a dreamer kind of person anyway, that's very attractive to me. The fact that Americans can think big and see the bigger picture. So I think that's something that's very special. I also think that there is a great sense of community here in a lot of pockets around America where there is an understanding. I mean, when we think of Christians engaged and our mission here at FPAF, we think of pray, vote, engage. There is this understanding that you have to engage. Unfortunately, sometimes in the UK, and, this isn't just the UK, this is Europe too. But there can be a little bit more of like, sit down and be polite. Let's not speak against the current. We don't want to upset things. And, actually, it's kind of funny because among British people, sometimes there's a little bit of a joke that Americans will speak their minds very easily and quickly and not really worry about what others think. And it's funny because I think even for me coming to the US and starting to integrate in this culture, I'm naturally quite polite. I'm not really one to like speak my mind blatantly. And it's really, really funny to me. I think it's actually mostly a really good thing because you're able to actually be honest and you stand up for what you believe in. You don't just be like blind sheep. So I think that's another difference. And I will say, I absolutely love America. I also love the UK. I don't mean any of these comments to be harsh towards the UK in any way. I think that the UK needs the kind of revival that America is experiencing too.
And it's different in the UK. Listen, these freedoms matter a lot, and that's why I wanted to have you on. We wanted to talk about this because some of what is going on in the UK previously, there's some good and some bad, Grace. So let me give you some good. The UK, they've already removed God from most things, and they've already socialized their healthcare, right? So they've already devalued human life on a lot of fronts. But when they were looking at the transgender statistics, they were more objective because they literally were just looking at human beings like they appear on a spreadsheet to them, which is where a lot of secular leftists think of us. And they're looking at the far right, like expecting this to be, and you're better, and you feel better, and you're healthier, and you got your dreams. We paid for them. And what they saw was death, destruction, maiming, regret, sky high suicide rates to the point where they actually issued emergency declarations to stop it. This is an inspiration. Our Supreme Court quotes them. But then at the same time in the UK, if you pray in front of a abortion clinic, you could be arrested because they don't have the First Amendment there. So that's what I mean. It's kind of wild, right? I mean, like it's different.
Yeah, it really is. I think something else that's very interesting is, when we talk about the fact that sometimes Americans don't know how good they have it. I think for me, especially after my first year at Caris, I went home that summer and I remember thinking, dang, like my American friends do not realize how good they have it. Now that I'm back here in the UK, so many things are just very normal and you can take them for granted out here. And I think that in America, it's easier to go after what God is calling you to do in many ways. I think in Europe, there's more resistance against that often, not necessarily totally meaningfully, but it seems, I know even for me personally, like my story, God has opened so many doors here, and it's probably also because it's where he wants me to be. But um in the UK, it felt like a harder route to try and get somewhere. So I mean, on a funny level as well, I remember, my first few weeks at Caris, we think that we speak the same language. Well, there's different words.
Now
And
that's a blast. Yeah.
yes, I remember, I was in line, as you guys call it, at the cafe at Caris, and I said
Well,
to
tell her what a line is. Hold on. This is where we got to have fun in the show. So,
well,
what's a line?
I said to the guy in front of me, I'm like, "Excuse me, is this the queue?" And he just looked at me like, "What the heck is a queue? What are you talking about?" And it was so funny. And then I also remember it was all like my first couple weeks. I was filling up water from the water fountain, and this this guy was like waiting for me to finish filling up, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've got two water bottles, like I'm filling one up for someone else." And he like asked me if I was faking my accent. I was like, "No." It's really funny. But I mean, there's lots of different words we call like gas stations, petrol stations, just different things like that. And it's definitely interesting. And I think the other thing, this is another funny kind of thing. British people tend to be quite sarcastic and dry with their humor. And I know that there are many Americans that can be like that, but I've had a couple of moments where I've been too sarcastic and they didn't realize I was being
They didn't
sarcastic.
follow you.
And
And then
then
I
I
follow
had
you
to
along
like
the way.
had to go back and be like, I didn't mean that for real.
So now, listen, this is fun. America is an idea as much as we're a country, the same as Israel is an idea as much as we are as a country. And one of the neat things I think in this moment, right? Because every year generations emerge and they do different things, but just with who we're talking with, so many in their 20s, I have a 23-year-old daughter getting married in a couple of weeks. I have a 17-year-old who's, or 18, she just turned 18, she's going off to college. And I just think this is an exciting time because I think the science is so clear that human beings are human beings at conception, right? That's undisputed on TikTok or everywhere, right? Because now they know they can even change the DNA, at conception and the rest of it. So we now we're talking about a human being, and there's just been this really interesting reaction. And it's one of the reasons why you're on our team. It's one of the reasons why our market is growing so well globally, not just in the United States, but it's Generation Z. Why is it that, you believe is a pro-life movement? What's going on with the rising generation? And why is it that life matters to them? It seems all this stuff seems counterintuitive to us, older folks. Grace.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that in terms of what we're seeing with the rising generation, I think that we're seeing a lot of actually depth of understanding because they've seen the generations before us try out what the world tries to sell us with casual relationships and all of these things. And they're realizing that it doesn't work, or they've tried it themselves and they have actually personally felt the horror of that. And I think that what we're seeing is actually some real true passion that comes from a heart of not just a passion for the subject, but a story that lies there as well. And I think that when we consider, older generations compared to us young people, I think that actually often what is not understood is the huge generational gap with technology, with all the crazy growth that we have with so many arenas. Young people are growing up in a completely different world to how older generations have had it. And I think that that's something interesting and important for older generations to understand. But I think that sometimes that lack of understanding can almost make older generations want to write off some of the younger people because maybe they perceive young people in a way that isn't quite true. And what I see is a lot of young leaders actually rising up. Gen Z is a very, very entrepreneurial, tenacious generation. They don't want to do things the status quo. And actually, most of them are very driven by an idea of using their life for something bigger than themselves. And so I think what we're seeing is a huge actual hope for the nation and huge potential for some incredible innovation and change. That also has to be balanced out with the fact that obviously we're seeing some horrible stuff among younger generations when it comes to the whole transgender issue and how so many young people are very vulnerable to some of that messaging. I think that that is also sobering from a perspective of having to recognize that we have to stay relevant to young people in this kind of movement. Otherwise, we could lose the future generation. So I think there's two sides, but I think there's some incredible hope. There's a lot of young people who are stepping up, who are doing things at a younger age, and God is opening those doors and blessing that. And I think when people who are more mature recognize that and want to pour into that, that there's a lot of success that then opens up. So I think with young people, when it comes to the pro-life, pro-family movement as well, a lot of young people are turning back to those family values, especially young men in our country right now as well. And that is really, really awesome to me to see that. And so I
Hold on,
think that
Grace, I got one fun one for you. And I've got
go
to do
for
this
it.
for our audience because
Yeah.
they're having fun and we're talking about the difference between our country and things. So, folks, this week, if you're already, by the way, if Family Policy Alliance, I'm with Grace Youngson. She is with us. She helps us. She is one of the co-hosts of the House to Home podcast with Joseph Combs. You've seen her voice. She is helping us grow up our 1630, our other youth projects, and our audience. She's helping us engage Generation Z, which I have three daughters in the rising generation. They're a lot more active than we thought. We're talking about their views and where they get them and why they get them. And really, folks, our hope. And that's why we have Grace on here. One of the things that is going on in my observation in the UK as well as the United States of America is that our rising generation is reading the Bible again, or they are choosing to consume Bible verses and other things like that. I believe, Grace, is because they spent a decade trying to find something that worked, tried everything else out there, and now the real stuff is appearing in the socials, and they're starting to follow it. Am I right or wrong? Is Christian content in more demand? What's going on? Is there a revival? Is it in the UK, the US, both? What's going on in America?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that we're seeing a lot of the rise of a lot of Christian influencers online now starting to put out Christian content, which I think is so needed because if we aren't putting out content from a godly perspective, the only content that's going to exist out there will be from the worldly perspective. And then we kind of wonder why our younger people are going down wrong paths. Well, the Bible tells us that we are what we eat, what we feed on spiritually, we become. And so I think that we're seeing such a rising demand for that because young people are also realizing, like, I cannot live this godly life without having godly food to consume. And so we're seeing the rise of different Christian singers and songwriters, influencers. And I think there's still a big vacuum for more of it, that young people are craving that because we live in a media saturated society. And so I think it's exciting what we're doing here at FPA or FPAF in creating content that will be able to touch hearts and speak to the issues of our day. And this is super important that we as the church are actually speaking into the issues of our day because I came across a statistic a little while ago that the number one reason why young people leave churches is because they feel like the teaching is no longer relevant to their lives, meaning that the church isn't actually touching on any issues that matter to them. And of course, it's important that we teach on faith, hope, joy, and love. But if we don't teach on what God says about abortion, about marriage, about family, those things become like cloudy ideals that have no actual practical application. And so I think that that's super important when it comes to this generation. They want things that are real. They are not looking for things that are sort of up in the pie in the sky type of thing.
Right. And we're seeing that they're backing that up with action. Our audience is growing. That's why we have Grace on staff, folks. It's because our audience is already getting very large. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be bringing dozens of young adult 1630 program to Washington, D.C. But this is all just very exciting stuff. The rising pro-life generation, they continue to get engaged. What should the folks that are listening in our audience right now know about their family policy councils? We have Grace, you and I know this firsthand. We have 40 state groups that employ over 400 employees, $60 million of revenue. We work with 50,000 churches. Grace, how important is it, if you're listening to this, to know the hope that we have for Generation Z? Are we seeing participation? Are we seeing growth? Or are we seeing them what? Understand, Grace, in America, and you can comment on the UK, but in the late 50s was the last time they said we saw people going toward the church. Since the early 60s, they said, no, people would rather do something else. I'm saying to you right now, nothing else is working. More people are going toward the church in America. I think that's happening globally. What are you seeing and hearing out there?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that I would think about in the analysis of this is my time at Bible college, because the Bible college that I attended is actually getting younger and younger in terms of typical attendee who comes. When it started, it was mostly people like 40 plus. Now it's like more of a young people's college. And it's open to all ages. They literally have people in their 80s studying here. But I think that that's really interesting and is a reflection of a trend that is happening. And I also think that in terms of FPCs, what I've observed among young adults is a lot of young adults really want to do something to change this country. They just don't know what that looks like. And if we can get them connected to FPCs and actually give them that education and that empowerment to take action, that is huge. Now, as a young person, I am able to take my zeal and pair it with action and create change. I think we have a lot of zeal, and if we're not careful, we can rile up that zeal, provide no action opportunity, and now it's almost a worse scenario because we got everyone all excited or even a bit angry and then didn't give them something to follow through with. I think that the demand is right there, and that as we're able to be relevant to young people, and not just, I think something that I've seen especially in the pro-life movement too is of course, I'm super passionate about the baby when it comes to the pro-life side of things. Very passionate about that. But also, when you start talking about how it affects women, a lot of young girls suddenly want to join because they see how they may have been affected or their best friend has been affected by this. And I think that as we're wanting to engage young people, when we're able to tell a story that literally involves them in a sense, that becomes extremely powerful for moving forward. And when we're talking about this nation and we're engaging young people in ways that is going to affect their future and their children's future, not just ideas, but like actual, this is going to change the future for your kids and even your own life. I think that becomes really big. And I think that there is a lot of energy and passion in the church and across social conservative young people that's just kind of waiting to be harnessed. And so I think the FPCs are literally the most incredible tool ever out there to harness this, which could completely turn the tide of this nation.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, Grace Youngson has been with us on this podcast. I'm Craig DeRoche, the CEO of Family Policy Alliance. And FPC, you're asking. Many of you know what that is because you listen faithfully. We put out this podcast once every week. Grace also puts out, on average, a podcast a week from house to home. You want to subscribe to that podcast. You want to hear it. You want to get this perspective. I know I need this perspective, it's not my age group, but it's my children's age group, and it matters. It's the future of our country, and we want you to pay attention to that. Grace, it's been a privilege to have you with us. It's a privilege to be able to grow an audience where we have people well over 100 years and people still aspiring to vote that are coming to Family Policy Alliance or getting involved with their local church. And they are optimistic about the American idea in the reboot that we have in front of us. Grace, thank you for being with us today. And until next week, blessings to you all.